Hi, welcome and thank you so much for joining Affinity's broadcast, introducing the Blackprint, a plan to build leadership capacity of Black LGBTQ plus women. My name is Imani Rupert-Gordon, and I'm the Executive Director for Affinity Community Services. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, or they, them, and theirs, and I will be your moderator today. Affinity is a social justice organization, and we work with all LGBTQ communities with a specific emphasis on Black LGBTQ women. Today, I'm joined by a couple of amazing panelists. The first is Charlene Carruthers. Charlene is the National Director of BYP 100 and author of the highly anticipated book, Unapologetic, a Black, Queer, and Feminist Mandate from Radical Movements. And our second panelist is Vilissa Thompson, founder and CEO of Ramp Your Voice and creator of the viral hashtag #DisabilityToWhite. Today, you'll hear these panelists speak about their experience, but you'll also have the opportunity to ask these leaders about specific things about your own leadership that might help you. Before we get started, I'd like to give a quick overview of the platform that we're using to enhance your experience. Because we have such a large group, you'll notice that you are already on mute, but this doesn't mean that you won't be able to interact with other people in the chat or in the presentation. You'll notice if you look to your left, there is a chat and questions and answers, and there are purple icons along the bottom of your screen. If you hover over the purple icons, you'll have a chance to see what each of them do. And then if you hit the blue reset button, your screen will return to the original setup. Now, you can interact with everyone that's participating in this webinar, and under questions and answers, this will go to someone on the back end who will feed these questions to me later in the presentation, so you'll have a chance to ask your questions. You can also make your screen larger if you hover over each screen, there's a gray border, and you can click and pull those and make them bigger or smaller, whatever works for you. And then again, if you want to change things back, then you can just go to the blue button again and hit the reset button. And then finally, we'll be asked the audience polling questions periodically. And the reason we'll do this because it's designed to keep you engaged in the presentation, but it'll also give us an idea what's on the top of your mind as we go through the discussion. So we want to pull up maybe the first polling question so people can see how it works. Great. So you see that the polling question, it might move a little bit so you can see it. But the first one is, do you think that the movements that you're part of are intersectional? The first one is yes, we make sure that they are. The second one is no, we need to be more intersectional. And the last one is I don't know. Go ahead and click which one, and then we'll follow up with that in just a little bit. So perfect. So we're going to get started now. The topic of today's workshop is building organizing power. And Charlene, both you and Vilissa are known for your leadership in mobilizing communities. To start off, could you please tell us your pronouns and then share when you started to realize that you were an organizer? And Vilissa, if you could start first, that would be great.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here today. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. And what got me into organizing is being a social worker. When I went to graduate school, I had a very limited understanding of what social workers do. And throughout my program, I learned about macro social work, which is about being in community, and community organizing is a part of that. And that one resonated with me deeply as I went through the course of grad school and then graduating. So, I had in the mindset that I wanted to do something on the larger scale within the community, and I started to do organizing virtually. I know that some people have some ideas that online advocacy isn't really advocacy, but it's very accessible for disabled people, particularly those of us who cannot go out in the streets to protest or go door to door due to limitations. I know for me, as a wheelchair user, going to people's houses is not feasible because everybody's house isn't wheelchair accessible. So for me, organizing online has been the way that I have created my brand and wrap my voice in a way to really talk about disability issues from an intersectional lens. And to really do that through blogging and through speaking engagements like I am here today, doing that is really important to me because I understood that there wasn't a lot of women of color with disabilities, particularly Black women and families doing this work. And that really led me to be purposefully intersectional in what I do and the issues and topics that I talk about and some of the controversies that I do as well. So that's kind of what has led me to that, organizing in a way that's really purposeful for me and really validating for me as well.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And Charlene, the same question for you. If you could start with your pronouns and then tell us, when did you start to realize that you were?
Hi, everyone. My name is Charlene Carruthers, and I am the National Director of BYP 100. I use she, her pronouns. And becoming an organizer was an intentional decision. I didn't just wake up one day or accidentally fall into it. I make a distinction between the time that I was an activist, someone who was doing community work, and the actual period of my life where I decided that I wanted to intentionally develop the craft of being a community organizer. So that means that I sought out training. That means for me that, or it meant for me at that time that I needed to seek out training. It meant for me that I needed to seek out mentors and also community and organization to be a part of. I was 23 or 24, and now I turned 33 at the end of this month. And so I've been in activism and organizing work since I was about 18 years old. And I started as a student when there were some things happening on my campus in Central Illinois where white students were working very hard to strip away the power of Black and brown and LGBTQ students from our student government. And so that year also included a trip to South Africa where I studied contemporary politics for about a month in 3 different areas of South Africa. So those are the early stages, but it was a couple years later where I was like, I want to intentionally build power within communities. I want to help develop leaders, and I want to move forward strategies that actually get us closer to liberation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So, the saying goes that timing is everything. And I'm wondering, how do you think that this translates to organizing? And I'm wondering if you could share a bit about how timing has played a role for you, or a window of opportunity, how it's either elevated or hindered the work that you do.
Yeah. So that's for me, Imani, yeah?
Charlene?
Yes. So timing, the phrase that timing is everything. There are all kinds of theories when it comes to community organizing about when can you start when is a movement actually a movement? When is it just a moment? To me, what's important is another phrase that, stay ready so you don't have to get ready, because you never know when the moment will come, be it in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. People didn't necessarily know what kind of moment that was going to be. I don't think the teenagers who were involved in Jena 6 anticipated that moment would come, and the community anticipated that moment to come. Or when Troy Davis, Oscar Grant, Rakia Boyd, Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, the young people who went out on August 9th, the day that Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson, Missouri, I don't think they anticipated what was to come. So it's about being ready. And for people who have committed themselves to movement work, being ready, and for folks who are just joining for the first time, knowing that there's never a perfect time to get involved in movement building. It's about collective will. It's about your will as an individual person, and also about making an accurate assessment of the conditions that exist. So right now, the context that we are living and working in is post the election and administration of the first Black president of the United States of America. Now we are living under a presidential administration that is in many ways, like Dr. Barbara Ransby, I've heard her talk about it as proto-fascism. We're also living, in various economic fluxes. We have high unemployment rates in Chicago. all kinds of things are happening, right? Like our communities have lack of access to quality housing, quality public schools, quality jobs. All of these things matter. The earth in itself and the environment is being impacted by years of degradation led by corporate capitalism, not just individual decisions. And so having a firm assessment of where we are and recognizing like where we've been, all of those things go into the issue of timing when it comes to movements. But there's never a perfect time. It's always the right time to organize for our collective liberation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So always be ready, y'all. Vilissa, same question. Can you share a bit about how timing has played a role in your work? If a window of opportunity, for whatever reason, it either elevated or hindered the work that you do?
I think that for the disabled community, the past year, timing is everything. Particularly when we have the battle for healthcare and protecting the ACA. I know that with the community, we really projected our voices about why we need healthcare and why protecting the policies for pre-existing conditions matter to not only the disabled community, but the broader community as well. So I really think that really going out there and really stepping up and writing those pieces, going out to protests, contacting officials, things that nature when it's timely issues is so important. So yeah, timing is the essence, and also being prepared. I think that all of us within the past, 2 years of this new administration has really done a lot of work to prepare for what's next and really learning how to better organize so that if we have a message that we want to put out, we are very effective in not only speaking up for our particular members in the groups that we are part of, but also getting the broader society to really understand why these issues matter, who's going to be the most impacted by it, and what can we do to really ensure that we get the outcomes that we are fighting for. So I think that for me, it's just really learning how to be a part of the conversation, learning what ways, your voice and your work best fits into that. I know for me, my art is writing. So when we had the ACA situation, I wrote a blog piece about why Medicaid mattered to me as someone with a disability, as someone who was on Medicaid for most of my life. So it was just very important to really get those stories out there and really organize with other activists and advocates of what's going on so that the collective point of what we're doing is heard loudly and really shake the table and get those who have the power or our key stakeholders to really listen and really do right and hold them accountable in case they don't.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So coalition building is really important in the work that we do, and to always be prepared. I think a lot of times we want to wait for a certain moment, but what we're hearing from both of you is that this is something that you always need to be working for, always being prepared, because you don't know what's going to happen. It might be that perfect opportunity. So, Vilissa, let's stay with you. I wanted to talk about your viral hashtag, Disability Too White. Highlighted a lack of inclusion in many movements. I'm wondering, can you share with us how you see your work as intersectional, and why do you think that it has to be?
Well, I think it has to be because many of us, check off many boxes, particularly, I know for me, being a Black disabled woman, that's 3 categories in itself. So I think that, when you are a minority within minority groups, you really have to make sure that everything is purposefully intersectional. When it came to the hashtag, that basically was allowing the conversation about the lack of intersectionality and lack of inclusion and the erasure of disabled people of color to really come about. The hashtag has been 2 years old, and it really allowed that conversation to come forth. I know that, in circles, particularly when you are a minority within an already marginalized community, we talk about these things amongst ourselves, but rarely do we feel the courage to discuss them publicly and feel empowered to call out the injustices. And the hashtag in its creation has allowed people to do just that, particularly when we talk about the history of disability and the images of disability. When people think of disabled people, it's usually white disabled men, then white disabled women. Rarely, if you were to do a Google search, you would see disabled people of color. I know if I look up images of Black disabled women, my own photos will come up. So just that alone, when it comes to that visibility, that representation, let us know what the issue is. And then we go beyond that to talk about the injustices within the education system, who's um, at the fringes of the school-to-prison pipeline, for example. When it comes to the medicalized racism, ableism, sexism, and other issues within the medical field, things come into play as well. So I really think that us really making sure that when we talk about intersectionality, we really talk about not only who's in the room and who's not in the room, but also when it comes to the different issues that we may fight for, what groups are being greatly disproportionately disadvantaged that we may not know about because of our own biases and our own lack of knowledge of what's going on. So I really think that for me, that hashtag really forced people to have these conversations and to really be more forceful to call out the injustices and to force people to make them, and also be empowered to make their own spaces for them so that they can be seen and heard and not feel left out as they used to.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa. I appreciate that. Charlene, you have a book coming out this summer, Unapologetic, a Black, Queer, and Feminist Mandate for Radical Movements. Mine has certainly been on pre-order, and I'm sure I speak for everyone. I say that we can't wait. But I also know that there's so many people that are sitting on book ideas, and we need our stories and our knowledge out there. And I'm wondering, can you share with us why you wrote your book? And then also, how did you know that you were ready to write it?
That is a great question. Those are all great questions. I keep Toni Morrison's quote in my mind that if there's a book that you want to read and it hasn't been written yet, you have to write it. And so this has been at least a 4-5 year journey of writing this book. And for me, it was important that for all the conversations that I've had with young folk, older folk, in between folk about what should they read in order to become a better activist or organizer, I can never really point to a book that was written by an organizer while they were doing the work. And I decided to write that kind of book. And when I did my research on the organizers that I look up to, like Ella Baker, she never wrote a book. And I imagine it's because, for many reasons, the value of women leadership and voices in writing books, time, accessibility to these types of conversations, all of those things, and the resources in order to do it. And so for folks who are I think I have a story to tell, but I don't think it's deserving or people would be interested in reading it, quiet that voice right now, because particularly if you are a Black person, Black LGBTQ person, a Black person who's been incarcerated, a Black person who has lived in this world, you have a story to tell. And for me, the ability to even get it out on paper, and it's a very, very long process that doesn't just happen because you decide you want to write something. It meant just like raising a child, writing a book takes a village. And so I had a lot of support in the process of actually getting it done. And I firmly believe that more organizers and activists should write books. And if you don't write a book, if you don't start with a book, you can start with an article. You can start with a blog, whatever that is. And it's a process, and everyone's process looks different. Some people write better in the morning. Some people write better at night. Some people write better in isolation. Some people write better in busy coffee shops like I do. I actually not like a person who writes well going out in the middle of the woods, but that works for some people, right? So if you feel like you want to, that means you're ready to do it. Just make sure you get the type of support that you need in order to get it done. I use a desktop application called Scrivener. Download it. It costs maybe $20 or $30 to help organize my writing. I was the most raggediest style writer before this. I didn't write outlines. I didn't do any of that. But Scrivener really helped me to organize my thoughts. And the book comes out in, less than 2 months, so August 28th. And folks can pre-order it on Amazon, on Powell's, on Barnes & Noble, pretty much anywhere, IndieBound, anywhere books are sold.
Thank you so much, Charlene. I appreciate that. So for both of you, so being in positions like yours, I don't know that people always think about the type of criticisms or the type of attacks that you receive. There's certainly racism, sexism, heterosexism, ableism, and all the other isms that probably wouldn't surprise most people. But I think what might come as a surprise is the amount of attacks that you receive from within your own communities. And I'm wondering, what are your strategies for dealing with people from your own communities, questioning if you belong in the movement or if your perspective matters? And a second part, do you treat criticism and attacks differently when they come from people that share your identities? And Charlene, why don't you get us started?
Okay. So I'm trying not to become that person who says, well, I wrote about it in my book, well, in chapter such and such. But there's one thing that I talked about is that in 2016, our organization 2015, our organization had never been more visible than it was in that particular moment. And I'd never been attacked more publicly than I was in that exact moment, nor had our organization been like as publicly attacked as we were. And basically this was in the aftermath of the release of the video of the police killing of Laquan McDonald, and in the midst of when one of our member leaders at the time, we received a report of sexual assault against a young Black woman who was not one of our members. And so we were catching it from the Chicago Police Department, catching it from people in movement community, catching it from all kinds of folks. And very few people took the time to say, hey, how are y'all doing? What are you all actually doing? What are the next steps? What are the next moves in making these things happen? How are you all approaching these things? It was just a lot of attacks, accusations on where we got our funding from, all kinds of stuff. People said, y'all are funded and controlled by rich Jewish men at University of Chicago. I was like, where is the check? Because I ain't seen the check. We didn't get the check from the rich or the wealthy white Jewish men at the University of Chicago. They've not ever given us a check. And so dealing with those things publicly, my practice is to actually not ever respond to them publicly, and to be in conversation with people who I know actually care about me and are invested in holding me accountable for when I am raggedy and when I do things that I should not be doing. And so when they come from people who I'm in community with, sometimes they hurt more. The criticisms, they can hurt more. And even like being in community with someone, it varies. Just because you are in the same movement doesn't mean you're in community with the person. But if you mean like Black folks or other LGBTQ folks or things like that, sometimes it can hurt more. I'm a little more used to like the white supremacists coming on a page and calling us all monkeys or something else. Like I'm more used to that. It doesn't really bother me as much. And so I think it's always important to have a village around you and be in community and not in isolation with people who actually have your best interest in mind and are not trying to be opportunists because they have an opportunity to shine off of your pain, which I have seen people do over and over again.
Thank you so much, Charlene. That was very thoughtful. I really appreciate that. Vilissa, if you could answer the same question, what are your strategies for dealing with people from your own communities questioning if you belong in this movement or if your perspective matters? And then do you treat those attacks differently when they come from people that you share identities with?
Well, I definitely agree with what Charlene said about that, because particularly when it comes to the differences in general with the white supremacists versus your own community. And then within the disabled community, anytime you try to shake up the status quo, basically the good old boys club, you do get, fierce pushback towards that. And the one thing that I realized I had to do was be direct, because I realized that they want you to power and they want you to reduce and silence yourself so that they can continue with the same nonsense they've been doing for decades. And I think that being very direct sometimes in people's faces and about what you're not going to do and what I am trying to do and what I will be doing. And this is why has worked very well for me. And that has really allowed people to respect what I do and to know to really think twice for bringing things to me that is not conducive to my overall mission and the overall mission of being more intersectional when it comes to the disabled experience. So for me, just being very direct when we have to be. I think there are times when we can, play the cards and, just really work together with people. But sometimes that direct approach, that in your face, that, is the way that would get some people to listen. But I think gauging the temperature of, what person or group, which method may work has been the most strategic thing that I've been able to do. I think also people respect, at least for me, when I am more direct. So they know where I'm coming from and they know how to approach me and how to engage with me so that if they want me to be a part of their work, they know my expectations. They know where I'm coming from. So that to me has been very beneficial. When it comes to particularly the Black community, for me, I do extend some grace when people don't understand disability from a more intersectional lens, but I am also very direct as well when people are purposefully obtuse and do not want to really tackle the ableism that they have, particularly those of us who are disabled but may not self-identify. There's strong internalized ableism and resistance to identifying as disabled within the Black community. And there are cultural reasons for that and even historical reasons. And for those reasons, I do extend the grace, but I do also want us to be held accountable. I know when I broach topics about the ableism within the Black church that disabled people like myself endure, when it comes to people saying, you pray hard enough, you pray to God, he'll heal you. And that's not true, And, when I challenge that and say, why can't my version of this human form be an image of God or, just be something that's positive, people really resist that mentality because they've never been challenged in that way before. So for me, challenging the community, particularly the Black community, to really rethink how we understand disability and from the different lenses such as, the religious aspect to even representation. I know that some people have had some issue with me asking for representation when it comes to brands like Fenty Beauty. I love what Rihanna has done, but I really wish if she's going to empower all women that I would like to see, a woman in a wheelchair, a woman with a cane, a woman with an amputated leg or arm, in that as well. So I really think that really forces people to understand that Blackness comes in all forms and that every form of Blackness deserves to be respected. Every form of Blackness deserves to be heard. And if we're all fighting for this thing called liberation, that no one will be reaching that milestone if some of us, i.e. Black disabled folks, are left behind. And to really force people to really have that type of understanding has been something I've been very purposeful for, particularly in Black spaces and holding Black people more so accountable because there's not a safe space for Black disabled people to be in. We're not safe in the disabled community and we're not safe in the Black community. So where can we fit in? And it really getting us especially to really see why disability matters and how people can check themselves so that they do not continue the wrongs that we have all experienced for so long.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. Thank you for being so thoughtful. I hope you're all getting this. This is amazing. Thank you. So next we're going to do another polling question. Just to keep you all engaged. And we also want to, we want you to start thinking about some things that maybe we don't talk about all the time. But this is, do you think the amount of online attacks organizers receive discourages creativity and movement building? And give your honest answer there. We'd love to hear from you. Also, we're going to ask one more facilitated question, then I'm going to go to audience questions. So please go ahead and write your questions in. I'd love to see them. And so while you all are filling those out, let's ask this last question. So while the audience was answering that, I'd really like to switch gears too. And this is something I'm dying to know from each of the panelists. We know that there's no one right answer for anything. And with that said, I'd also wonder if you could save people some time and perhaps some heartache. Can you share something that you had to learn the hard way? And Charlene, let's start with you.
There's so many things that I've had to learn the hard way. Where do I begin? I guess I'll share that I don't have to ask for permission to do the work that I do. I don't need pre-approval for me to be a part of movement. That is different from having consent, right, from communities or being in an organization and like being some lone wolf. That's different. But to make the decision that I want to do this work, I don't have to get approval from someone else to do that. I think the other piece is that it's that I've learned the hard way is that I have very little to lose by taking risks. Like, tried stuff, it's okay to fail. Everything's not going to be perfect. Yeah, that's what I would say.
That's a good one. Very little to lose by taking risks. Thank you so much for sharing that. Vilissa, what about you? If you could save folks some time and some heartache, what is something that you had to learn the hard way that maybe we wouldn't have to?
I think for me, and I think that the lesson I had to really came about in the last year, is not everybody's going to like your move, but as long as you know what your vision is, that's all that matters. I think that for me, doing this work, I'm 32, so I think that I would have a different reaction to differences of opinion if I was younger than I am at this age. It really makes a difference. I think that as you get older, you start to really prioritize what matters. You prioritize the voices that matter, particularly those in your circle, and also becoming better at gauging who should be in your circle as you do this work, because this work can be very lonely, it can be very challenging, and if you don't have that right support system, those issues can be exacerbated. So I really think that having people around you that you know that if you were messing up, they would check you in a way, but also staying firm with the fact that your moves are your moves. How somebody else would do XYZ is their method, but your method has value, your method, has a system. As long as you know what the end goal is and willing to adapt as, you learn what works and what doesn't, to me, that's the main thing. I think that, the people-pleasing aspect of activism, people wanting you to bend for their will, people wanting you to do it their way and not really thinking that everybody has their own flavor, so to speak, in how they organize. And there's more than one direction to go into when it comes to liberation, when it comes to freedom, when it comes to whatever the end goal that you may have in mind for your particular work. I think learning that and knowing that firmly really helps you when you do get that pushback. And to really know that, at the end of the day, that what you're doing, nobody else can do. You have a purpose. People can do the same thing, but the outcomes will always be different. And to really know that what you have to bring to the table is valuable, and to not really, shy away from being your unique self, and also doing self-care as well. Knowing when to pull back to re-energize. I know that's one thing, organizers will not always talk about is that burnout effect, and to really be conscious of your limits and knowing when you've had enough and what recharges you. That goes back to having a support system. That goes back to figuring out things that, bring you joy, with hobbies, unplugging for social media, maybe re-strategizing a method that you're doing. All those things that matter in the process. So I think that's a little something that most organizers don't really talk about publicly, but it matters so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I also want to let folks know the poll that we just had. Do you think the amount of online attacks organizers receive discourages creativity and movement building? 41% of you said yes, 29% said no, and 29% said I don't know. And that's something to think about when we are being critical in movements and the ways that we're going about doing that. So let's start thinking about that. That concludes the facilitated Q&A session. And now I want to get to some of your questions. And I see that there are some really good ones here. The first one that I am reading is for Vilissa. It says, hi, Vilissa. I read an article on your blog about the autistic character on the TV show Claws and how it was being portrayed by a non-autistic actor. What what advice can you give me as a filmmaker who is interested in casting a role for a character who does have a disability?
Oh, that's a great one. Well, what we call that in the community is cripping up, is when a non-disabled person plays a disabled character. And for a filmmaker like yourself, or someone who's interested, in media representation, really being intentional in finding disabled actors and actresses to play those roles. We wouldn't want someone to, do a blackface, persona when it comes to Black representation. The same thing is true for disability. If you have a actor that uses a wheelchair, have a character that uses a wheelchair, or a character that is amputee, or a character that is autistic, find those persons. There's plenty of disabled talent out there, plenty of actors and actresses who are just waiting to be casted in the next big film or the next big hit TV show. So really seeking out that and not really pushing back or being quote unquote lazy. But that's basically what it is when people do not hire disabled talent for these roles. It's laziness. And it's also the fear of, oh, if I add this person to this project, what type of accommodations I'm going to need? Will this cost me a lot? What can I do? And honestly, that fear is, erroneous. You really have to be sometimes creative and bringing people into what you're doing, but that should not prevent you from casting correctly when it comes to disabled roles. So really think outside the box. And if you're not sure how to do that, ask. There's some great disabled filmmakers and actors and actresses out there who would lend their expertise as consultants or as part of your project and be willing to pay them for their time, because that's the thing that a lot of people don't like to do when it comes to disabled activists is pay us for our time. So make sure that you have the funding to do that, because that shows respect of what they bring to you, that they don't have to. So really paying them for their time, bring them into the fold, make sure that if you're writing a disabled character, we have disabled people, in the writer. We have disabled people who can tell you, that yes, the direction that you're going in when it comes to this character and how you talk about the disability is empowering and not playing on tropes or stereotypes. So I really think that being intentional is so important when we think about media, and not just film, but television. Even when we talk about writing characters and books, really getting that feedback from the actual members of the community really makes a difference to make sure that your particular form of art is authentic and respectful.
Thank you so much for saying that. And I also want to say, as part of the Blackprint, we're a very small organization here at Affinity, but we are committed to paying each of our panelists, and pay everyone the same amount to just be more thoughtful, knowing that, especially working with underrepresented communities, knowing that sometimes negotiating rates is something that's difficult, and that's something that we're committed to as well. I see another great question here. We're seeing that young people at the forefront of movements. What do you say to people that believe that folks need more seasoning or education to be taken seriously? How do you talk to people about what young people bring to the table? Charlene, why don't we start with you for this one?
Yeah, so I work with young Black folks across the country in BYP 100, and I actually started working with other young people when I was 18 years old. And I've taught cooking classes to middle schoolers, and just there's some things that are just like consistent throughout all of that work, is that there's learning to be done no matter what age you are, and there's teaching to be done to others no matter what age you are. And I believe it takes a certain level of humility, no matter how old you are, when you enter a space, to humility and discernment, meaning that you can have a really good assessment of how you should show up in a space. And as a young person, know coming into the room that people are going to assume that you don't know anything. And guess what? There are going to be things that you know, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that you do not know because you haven't learned it yet, and that's okay. And as an older person coming into a room, people may assume that you know lots of things. And so coming in with a dose of humility and being clear about what it is that you do not know, and that there are things for you to learn as well. learning never stops. It's a lifelong thing. On the other end of this, it's important to note that many of the issues, be it intra-community violence, gender-based violence, poverty, unemployment, lack of access to health care, absolutely impact young people. And so if we're going to be about the business of creating strategies that dismantle systems of oppression, that actually will require us to have not just young people at the table as tokens, but young people at the table as strategists, young people at the table as people who are spokespeople, who are developing messaging, and experts on their own experiences, right? Everybody is at best an expert on their own experience. You are not an expert of all things. I am not an expert on all things Black people. I'm an expert on organizing. I can tell you that much. And like those things, and building the type of organization that we built, I can't tell you the global experience of what it means to be Black, or what it means to be a woman, or what it means to be in the LGBTQ community. That is the work that work requires all of us to chime in. And so value young people, don't tokenize them, understand that young people too can be strategists and leaders on things, and not just leaders of tomorrow, but actually leaders of right now. And on the other end of that, for young people who are tuning in, take the time to develop your craft and know that there's always so much to learn in this work.
Wonderful. Thank you. Vilissa, same question. Do you have anything to add about young people being at the forefronts of movements? What do you say when you hear that when folks say that you need more seasoning or education to be taken seriously? How do you respond to that?
I think this is the fact that many of our movements that we look up to were started by young people. So it really goes against that notion that young people don't have value. And I think that some of the bright ideas, some of the new ideas come from those who are new organizers and activists. I think that they bring a different perception to what has been done, what's going wrong, what's going right, and how they want to change things. I think when you have new sets of eyes, so to speak, on a movement or on the work, that really can generate ideas that were not thought of beforehand. So I think there, speaks a lot of, having someone who does have experience. But I think it's also just important to really have people who are young, who have the energy. Because I know the older you get physically, you may not want to go out, in the street, or you may not want to, work, all types of hours, because you may have a family, life, continues as you get older. So you may have more responsibilities on your plate than you did when you were younger. So, looking to young people who have the energy, who, have the ideas, who are excited. Because sometimes you need that excitement in a movement, because sometimes movements can get stale. And young people can bring that excitement that may have been missing, and to really re-energize everyone in there. So I really think that, really seeing young people as valuable is so important. I know that for me, even though I'm still youngish, I am looking forward to the time when I can pass the baton to younger people, and even looking now for advocates who are, younger than me, to really support them in what they're doing and mentor them in a way to let them know my mistakes and what I wish I had known when I had started this work for me 5 years ago. And, the lessons I've learned and how I, strategize better, how I handle stress better, how I handle disagreements better, how I handle conflict better, how I handle, just being confident who I am as an organizer, as an activist. All those lessons I can pass on to someone else. So it really gets me excited to work with those who are younger than myself. So I really don't get people who resist that. I really feel that you are missing out on important key perspectives in your movement that can really keep it fresh and keep it modern, so that it doesn't get too run the mill, too in the groove that sometimes our movements can get into.
Thank you so much. And we have another question here. What advice do the panelists have for dealing with toxic masculinity in movement spaces? This is a good one. Charlene, why don't you start us off?
Oh. Ooh. So where do I begin again? These are really important questions. Toxic masculinity. So I'll start by saying that toxic masculinity can be manifested, practiced, embraced, engaged by people of all genders and no gender. It is not, toxic masculinity is not only in the domain of cisgender, heterosexual men. That's a lie. Don't let anybody tell you that. Especially as an organization, Affinity being an organization that focuses on Black women of all experiences and the broader LGBTQ community, know that it shows up. And so I think that's step one, is recognizing that you don't have to be a man in order to embrace toxic masculinity. The other part is making sure that what we say in our mouths with our words is that we actually back it up with practice. And that you can have all the theory in the world, you can know all of the language in the world, but if you consistently show up in a way that's dominating as opposed to collective power, or you show up in a way where you don't listen to people, you show up in a way where your opinion is the right opinion and the authority. If you are physically violent to your partner and you call yourself an activist or an organizer, a social justice activist or organizer, but you go home every day and you're emotionally neglectful, you are physically abusive, all of those things, that in and of itself is not practicing the values that you espouse as being a person who's a part of this movement. And so it's about, for me, what I do, right, is constant assessment for myself and people who I'm in community with about how I show up. Because none of us are exempt from it. None of us just wake up. We wake up as people. We're born as people. And then we are socialized in a world that tells us that you go here, you go there, you act this way, you act that way. And when you don't act a particular way, you don't go in a particular way, violence can be the result, right? So we have to do that emancipatory work with each other and everyday practice, how we show up in our relationships, how we show up with our coworkers, how we show up when we are going to a restaurant and ordering food. How are you talking to people? It's all of those things matter.
Thank you so much, Charlene. Really appreciate that. Vilissa, do you have anything to add about dealing with toxic masculinity in movement spaces?
I think that for me, what I've done and other disabled women and families that I know particularly, who are the receiving end of that good old boys club that I mentioned earlier, is having a safe space to talk about what's going on. Having a unofficial list of who, the perpetrators are. Because it's so important to know who the abusers are in these situations, particularly when they have power or they hold certain positions in the organizations, knowing that it's not just you who may have had a questionable or a pretty blatant, inappropriate encounter with someone. That it's not just you. So I think creating a safe space so people can talk about their experiences, they can warn other people. I think that's so important as well. I know some of us don't want to, quote unquote, tattle on people, but when it comes to safety, especially, it's very important for people to know who is a safe co-conspirator, who is a safe comrade that they can align themselves with, and who they need to be mindful of if they have to be in their presence. So creating a safe space for people to discuss both persons who are doing harm. I think that's very important when it comes to organizing and to really being able to address toxic masculinity, knowing, how, there's a particular organization, particular leader that is, being detrimental to the overall movement. How can we band together to call them out or, if it's appropriate, sometimes call in, but, either way to address it so that no more harm is being done to those who are on the receiving end of it. I think that's the one thing that I really noticed that we do within the disabled community. We know who those people are. We know how to protect each other. We know how to band, with one another to go about that. And sometimes some of the perpetrators are fellow women and femmes, and also knowing that as well, and knowing what women and femmes are not your ally, in a way. So, being conscious of how to address, when women and feminists are the perpetrators, and what can we do to address them, and how to, really band together in that sense as well.
Thank you so much, Vilissa. I really appreciate that. You had said something about co-conspirators, and I know that that's a word that you use, and other people use the word ally. And I see another question here that kind of relates. How do you work in coalition with people that are outside of your identity groups? And that's thinking about working with co-conspirators. Vilissa, why don't you start, and then we'll go to you, Charlene.
Well, I think that really asking around, that's one thing that I do. If somebody wants to partner with me or collaborate with something, I have no problem asking, who is this? Are they, what they say they're about? And getting that knowledge from those that, who are also co-conspirators, particularly white folks, really helps. I know being a Southerner, one thing I know is that white people are very blunt about other white people, particularly if they like you or not, a lot to be blunt about them too. So really getting that inside information really helps so that you don't find yourself in a situation to where you are being tokenized, where you may be harmed, where you may be, have to work co-opt, because those things happen. I've had stories, I've had to prevent situations from happening to me. So being very smart about who you co-conspire with is so, so crucial, so that when you're doing this work, because a lot of us are giving, our emotional, mental, sometimes our physical selves to this work, making sure that the labor that you're already giving isn't going to be taxed even more because you're dealing with somebody who is harmful, who is, just looking to get that ally cookie and that's it. So you won't be wasting your time, and you can put in time with co-conspirators, allies that are about the work, that understand the work that you do, that respect what you do, and want to be held accountable so that whatever that they're doing, is the best of what they can do. So I think that's really being smart about it, asking those questions and saying no. Let your no be no and your yes be yes. I think that's critical as well. And it's okay to say no, and you don't have to explain that no. Remember that no is a complete sentence. And I know that I have been firm within the past year of let my no be no. And then people, sit with that and deal with their feelings on their own time, but not internalize that for myself.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for saying that. Charlene, same question. How do you work in coalition with people outside of your identity groups?
Well, I think it's really important to note that the way that most people talk about identity politics doesn't tell the full story. So when the Combahee River Collective said that they are working, when they defined identity politics in the 1970s, this is a group of Black women, including Black lesbians. They talked about how they identify from their place of they organize from a place of their identity, and it is connected to a set of political values. And so being Black, being a woman, being queer does not automatically make you radical. It doesn't automatically mean you have a certain set of politics at all. And so I don't align myself in organization with Black people just because we are Black. It is important to me that to work with and be in community with Black folk who have a certain set of values, meaning that they are either abolitionists or aspiring abolitionists or learning more about abolition as a politic and as a movement. It means that they are pro-LGBTQ, pro-migrant, especially pro-trans and pro-migrant, pro-immigrant, all of those things, very specifically, and doing that work that matters to me. And so that is what I look for when I'm working with people who don't identify as Black or as a woman or as queer. I can't rock out with you if you are about the business of people being in cages and you actively promote for people to be in cages. That's not going to work for me. And so when we have shared analysis, and we don't have to agree on everything, but when we have some shared values around family, around solidarity and sovereignty and things like that, then that's a place in which we can work with each other and a place in which we can organize and build with one another. And identity matters for sure, because it informs so much of what I do. And we can't just stop at identity. There's so much more work to be done in relation to that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Charlene. You all see there's another polling question that's popped up. If you could answer this and help us out, and then there's going to be a quick survey right after. It'll take less than a minute and it really helps us. But the polling question is, do you think there's a clear path to learn how to successfully be part of mobilizing communities? Yes, no, or I never thought about it. And this helps us along with next steps in figuring out the ways that we can support community. And so I have one final question for the panelists. I'm wondering, could you please leave us with 3 things that you'd like us to remember, 3 things you'd like us to take away from what you've shared today? And then also, if you could tell us one book that changed the way that you think. I think, we're very rarely in situations where we can do that, and we'd love to hear from you. Vilissa, why don't you start?
Okay. My 3 are, disability is a part of every political and social justice issue. So if you're not including disability, your work is automatically incomplete. Know that you need to check your ableism because we all have biases and prejudices. So really be conscious of that, particularly if you bring in disabled people into your work, making sure that you are aware of how you view disability and if those projections will be felt or seen either intentionally or unintentionally. And if you're, unknowledgeable about something, admit that and do the work to be knowledgeable about it. And though it's not on the backs or the place of those whose experiences you may be not the most abreast of, to educate you, do that work yourself. I think that's so important. And the book for me that has really shaped how I understand racism from the other perspective of how white people understand it is Light in August by William Faulkner. That was a book that I read in high school that really gave me this perspective of how a white writer can write about racial issues, and it really allowed me to see what the other side thinks of it, and really helped me really see how my work will be impacted or will be received by that.
Melissa, thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Charlene, same question. If you could leave us with 3 things that you want us to remember and one book that changed the way you think.
So 3 things. Let's see. First, that being a part of organization matters. Being a lone wolf in political work, you can do some stuff for sure, but find a political home that you can be a part of. Number 2, know that this is a long-term struggle. It's long and protracted, that it didn't start this year and it won't end this year, and that you are one of many in the lineage of people doing this work. And number 3 is love matters just as much in your personal life as it does in your public life. And so make a commitment to yourself to not just do work on the outside, but to do work for yourself. Self-work really matters as much as community care or collective care matters. The community can't do all the work for you. The community cannot heal you from your trauma. The community can create spaces for you to do that work, but we have to actually do the work. And the book, for me, there's so many, but Assata's autobiography, Assata Shakur's autobiography, really pivotal for me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That is all the time that we have today. I want to thank our panelists, Charlene Carruthers and Vilissa Thompson. Thank you so much for your insight and for your candor and sharing your experiences. I want to thank our audience for your participation and for your incredibly thoughtful questions. We really appreciate it. And also want to remember that we'll have a different workshop every Thursday in July from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock Central Standard Time. Next week, July 12th, we'll be joined by filmmaker Cookie Hughes and Monica Roberts, founding editor of Transgrio. Make sure you tune in and can't wait to see you then. And if you want to find out more about us, We are at Affinity, AFFINITY 95.org. And afterwards, this will send you to our website. You can sign up for our newsletter and find out more about us. Also, I was just informed that there was a bit of a glitch. The survey will actually go out through email. You'll get that. If you can fill it out, it takes less than a minute. It really helps us as we build these next workshops to make sure we're getting all the information that you want, and it helps us follow up with things too. Thank you so much for being here. It was our pleasure. Have a good one.